The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Eoin Lowry here at this week's Farmers Journal podcast, and I'm with John Donoghue, CEO of IFAC, at the launch of the Farm Financial Planning Booklet. So John, tell me, why is it so important, I suppose, to have a booklet like this?
Hi Eoin. I suppose, look, we initially put this booklet together back in 2008, and it was all around dealing with the financial collapse that had taken place in worldwide markets and the impact that was going to have in Irish banks, and the actual impact was going to have then in farms, because obviously farms have to deal with banks for finance and they're dealing with merchants and merchant credit and all that kind of stuff, and credit had dried up substantially in worldwide markets. So we put together this magazine with Farmers Journal at the time, with Peter Young as the primary contributor from the journal and our own contributors in-house as well, and the idea was to equip farmers and educate them to deal with the financial stresses that were going to come as a result of worldwide crisis. Now in 2016, it's becoming a similar situation on farms because of commodity prices. There's serious financial stress involved.
Many farmers listening to this will be very concerned, I suppose. They're looking at their bank balances, they're looking at the milk check or their grain check coming in. They're very concerned about, I suppose, the income. What is in this booklet that will help them address some of the concerns that they have?
Well, this book won't help you improve your income. What it will help you do is manage your finances. So I suppose you have lots of things in there like a cash flow planner and detailed instructions and guides as to how you deal with your bank, how you deal with merchant credit, all those kind of areas. The number one piece of advice is to deal with financial stress early and identify financial stress early. And some people are just not great at doing that because they don't have up-to-date figures, they don't monitor their finances enough. And this booklet, if you use the tactics that are in here, will help you to do those things.
It's very evident, looking at the new lending figures that come out from the CSO last year, that more new lending was advanced to the sector than there was in the previous year. So the money seems to be available there.
Absolutely. Good presentation. To finance a project now, realistically, you're going to have 3 years accounts, pretty much up to date. You're going to have a good idea of how your farm is performing now in 2016, and you're going to have to be in a position to do a 3 to 5 year cash projection into the future, showing the benefit of the project that you're actually going to engage in. And the other thing I'd say here on is that it has happened in the past. It's a little bit of a habit that people tend to look at good cash flow in a good year and say, look, I'll spend that on capital investment, I'll build a new shed, I'll buy the new tractor. But eventually that cash going out of the system has to be financed, and you'll find that it'll need to be financed in years where commodity prices are lower and profit levels are lower.
When most farmers hear cash flow, I'm assuming that they run a mile with that big word. It's the big bad word. Will this booklet, first of all, help them to address that, and if and where can they get further help?
This booklet, I think if anybody consumed it, every page of it, and actually understood it and learned it and took it on board, the messages that are in there, you'd be a lot more financially savvy than you are before you open it, right? Very few people will do that. They'll dip in and dip out as they need it, and possibly when financial stress arises they'll start to dip in a little bit more. But further help is available. We're certainly providing lots of services in this area. In IFAC we're dealing with farmers every day of the week. It's our speciality. We're a cooperative and we look after farmers' needs in financial terms.
If we just look at, I suppose, access to finance is one of the issues, but then the cost of that finance. And we've then seen new initiatives come out from some of the co-ops, including Glanbia and now Dairy Gold, and I hear also that Arrivo and Lakeland are working on something. How does a farmer go about accessing those best rates?
That's a very difficult one to do, Owen. I suppose a good relationship with your client manager in the bank is important. Again, it's a case of if you have a good idea of where your finances sit, you're in a better position to negotiate with your bank on rates.
How are you seeing in IFAC the financial situation on farms this year versus last year or the year before?
It's definitely a difficult year for farmers, no question about that. And cash flow is disimproving as we speak, really, because we're heading towards the most expensive part of the year, autumn time, and look, we're not going to have the same returns on farms. So cash flow is definitely tightened. We're seeing that on a day-to-day basis.
And would your advice be that farmers, if they find themselves in a tightening situation, that they would talk to their bank sooner rather than later?
Absolutely, yeah. As early as a financial stress is identified, if you can see that you're not going to make a payment or that you need to defer some payments, you need to talk to the bank as early as possible. And certainly that's something that we would advise people to do. The cash flow gaps can be fairly significant and unforeseen, and you definitely don't want to arrive in October, November time with a payment to make and not be able to meet it without having talked to the bank.
No, because that can have knock-on consequences for everything else. Yeah,
absolutely, and into the future.
It seems to be a very informative booklet. It's available on the Irish Farmers Journal website, and also I'm told it'll be available at the Tullamore show and at the ploughing match later in the year. There'll be more details in this week's Irish Farmers Journal. John, thanks very much for talking to me. I think it's an invaluable piece of work that is needed and should be read by every farmer out there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eoin.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Donoghue, the home of Irish dairy.